Morning everyone, welcome to the Mitchell Brewery. It's October 2019, I've got the boiler on. It's quite a nice looking day here in Nottingham. I've got my malt lined up. I'm going to make another pale ale. I've got my crystal, I've got my Citra hops, my Caramalt, my Torrefied wheat, porridge oats, a new standard, Munich Malt, Target, and I've got East Kent Goldings and Cascade. So all these lovely ingredients will go to make a fantastic beer. And if you're really interested, these are the proportions I'm going to be using today, or as close as. So let the fun begin. Looks like the boiler has now got to 100 degrees C. So I'm going to turn the boiler off. As you can see, I've got my fan on. Otherwise the condensation in this place takes over and everything becomes covered with water. So I'm going to let that cool down to less than 80 degrees C, then I'll put about 10 litres into the mash tun and then start putting the malt in, and then this will be sealed up for an hour and a half for mashing. This water is now cooled to less than 80 degrees C, so I'm putting about 10 litres of water into here. So that's 5. Time to get the mash on. Here we go. This is the main ingredient. This is the Otter pale malt. This is a 25 kg sack. So as you can see all that lovely white stuff is pretty much the sugar that's going to be converted to alcohol. So we're going to get about just over 3 kilos of this into the mash tun, along with the various other bits and pieces of malt. Here we go. First kilo of the pale malt to go into the mash tun, and I'm just going to literally tip it in. I'm going to keep adding and then I'll give it a good stir in a bit. So the malt is added to the mash tun and I've got my trusty spoon. All I need to do now is give it a really good old stir, because you want all of the malt in contact with water to ensure that all of the sugar is dissolved away from the malt. You don't want any dry patches, so give it a really good stir. Bear in mind you've got to crack on because this needs to be sealed up for an hour and a half, so you don't want to lose too much temperature at this stage. So let me just turn off this video and I'll get on with it. So that's nicely stirred up. Just need to get the lid on and I need to seal it up. There you go, that's my homemade cover over the mash tun. I'm going to leave that now for an hour and a half. In the meantime, I'm going to go and get a haircut. So I'm back from the haircut. What do you reckon? I'm going to get on with the brewing, and this boiler needs to be refilled and put back to boil. This is still mashing, the fan's still evacuating the shed or whatever you call it. So time to carry on brewing. I rehydrate the yeast before I use it. So what I've done, I've boiled 110 ml of water, which I put in here, and I've allowed to cool to less than 30. And all you do to start with is just literally just tip the yeast and just let it sit there on top of the water, and then in about 15 minutes give it a stir. And then this will then gradually rehydrate, and then you basically pitch into the bitter wort later. Just filled the fermentation bin, added a cup of sterilising tablets. This is what I normally use, and as I always say, if it's good enough for babies, it's good enough for beer. So that'll stay now for a few hours just to make sure it's completely clean before I add the bitter wort. This is one of my favourite parts of brewing. It's revealing the mash tun after it's done its thing. It's been soaking for a little bit longer than an hour and a half due to my haircut interlude, and here you go. Oh, you can smell the malty Ovaltine goodness. So what I have to do now is run off the first part of the extract. There you go. So I normally run off this first part, and this will have sediment in it, so what I'll do is I normally tip it back in here. So this acts as a bit of a filter bed to capture those particles And then I'll start sparging. You can see what I've done. I've added is fine roast from a watering can onto a pipe onto the boiler tap. This water has now been boiled and cooled to less than 80. This will then sparge through here. That will wash out the sugar from the malt, and that will then form what we call the sweet wort. That will then go back into the boiler, boil up to 100. That's when we add the hops, and then it's converted from the sweet to the bitter wort. So let's crack on. Here we go. You can see a nice fine sparging spray playing across the malt. The idea being to remove as much of the remaining sugar in the malt, and then for that to go as a solution into this fermentation bin here, which is the sweet wort. I've got somewhere in the region of 30 litres of sweet wort. This was the first extract, so this will have more sugar in it. This was the second, and I'll put this in the boiler and I'll top it up with this, and I'll use this to top up the boiler, because as it boils for an hour and a half, in the next boiling stage there will be loss due to evaporation, so I'll need to keep topping it up. So the boiler is nearly back at 100, so it's almost time to start adding the hops, and I've got 4 hops here. I've got Target, Citra, East Kent Golding and Cascade. Now there are 2 types of hop here. We have what we call the leaf hop, so basically these are the hop cones which have been dried and compressed, and then we have something called pellets, basically, which is hops that have been compressed into pellets like this. These are a bit more concentrated than leaf. I find leaf hops easier to deal with because pellet hops disintegrate right down into a very, very fine sort of sludge, whereas this generally breaks down into more sort of pellets, petal sized shape, so it's much easier to remove. And with the pellets you have to use sort of like muslin bags to sort of try and keep all of the sludge in one place and remove it. So I'm going to crack on and start adding the hops. So here we have 30 grams of the Target, you can see it's the leaf hops. I'm going to add this into the nice boiling sweet wort. As you can see, this is just about to overflow, so if I give it a bit of a stir, that should sort of calm it down a bit, I hope. And I've taken the lid off as well, so the fan should help to control things a little bit, and you can see now we should have a nice rolling boil of the sweet wort, which is now being converted into bitter wort by the addition of the Target hops, which are primarily for bittering. It's at this stage in the brewing that I have to keep a close eye on the boiler, because in past brews it's cut out during this stage. So if we just turn off the fan, and you can hear the boiler's working fine. When it cuts out, we lose that sort of like low sort of rumbling noise. Oh dear, can you hear that? Precisely, it's cut out. So I'm going to have to empty this out, clean the element and fill it back up again and set it boiling again. A little bit frustrating because all this is doing is wasting time, and all that heat's going up and it's going to have to be reheated again. So anyway, okay, you can see what the problem is. If you look at the element, you can see it's covered in white deposit, which is basically sugar which is crystallised onto the heating element, and made it cut out. So I just need to clean that off. We start again. The hot boil is finally back up to 100 degrees C, so that cost me about 45 minutes I think all told, so I'm back on track and gonna crack on another half an hour the next hop edition. Time for the Citra hops to go in. they're glorious, those hops. Fantastic. I love Citra. Here is the copper chiller. It's just purely just a copper pipe which has been round into a spiral. The water comes at the bottom, spirals round and out the top. And this is a fantastic heat exchanger. It's getting a little bit corroded here, but when it comes out of the boiler it'll be nice and shiny again. So the copper chiller just goes in to the boiler for about the last sort of 10 or 15 minutes, and the boiling temperature of the bitter wort sterilises the chiller, so don't worry about that. There we go, that's the end of the hop boil, and I've got the 2 bags of hops ready to pop into boiler, so I'll just turn off the boiler and pop those hops in. I'll just unplug it as well just to make sure it stays off. And I will now turn on the chiller. So as you can see, the chiller is connected to these pipes which are connected to my outside tap, which seems to be a very, very long way away. So let's just turn on the straight away. I'm getting the water coming through. Just go and check here. Oh yes, that's where the cold goes in, that's where the warm comes out. You can feel it's nice and hot, and you can literally, well, I won't stand here watching it, but you could almost watch this going down. There you go, that's taken less than 20 minutes. I think this ample chilled enough. I should go and turn it off. Time now to transfer from the boiler to the primary fermentation bin. Yay! Just got shy of 25 litres of the bitter wort, so now I shall put this in the house and pitch the yeast. Here we go, it's the yeast, it's hydrated, it's ready to pitch into the bitter wort. Give it a bit of a swirl around, and then just tip it in. There you go, that should do it. And I'll seal this up and I'll leave it for about 5 days for the next stage. 6 days later, and the primary fermentation has finished. The bubbles stopped bubbling, and here we go. This is the beer that needs to be transferred. I've got my sterilised pressure barrel. I've got 71 grams of sugar. I've already added some beer finings, and I've got my trusty siphon, which is going to siphon it into the pressure barrel. So let's get on with it. This is a very simple process, and this will take about 10-15 minutes to transfer from here into the pressure barrel. There we go, that's a full barrel. That will stay now for a couple of days, and I'll transfer it to the bottles. Okay, I'm on the home straight with this one. I've got my barrel, it's been there for a couple of days after I filled it. I've got 43 washed, sterilised and rinsed bottles. I've got my device for sticking crown caps on the bottles without the gloss tops. So let's get on with it. I love this bottling wand. Basically it's a very simple thing that you attach to the tap, and at the end you've got a little device which stops the beer from coming out. So if I turn on the tap, it should just fill up with beer and then not come out of the bottom. You can see. And there you go. So all you do then is get your bottle and you just get to the bottom and it should start filling up. Look at that, brilliant. It's looks a bit frothy actually. So this one might need to settle a bit. So we'll basically just let it fill up to a certain level, and then when you want the filling to stop, you just release the bottle. What you must not forget to do is release the cap at the top, because what happens is you form an airlock and that stops the beer coming out. So I'm just going to loosen the top knot. Right, let's try that again. And overfill it, so stop about there. I will top that up a little bit. You want to leave about sort of an inch or so at the top, that's the ullage, and that allows it to ferment in the bottom properly. There we go, that's 43 bottles of beer, all bottled up, and I'm going to leave for 4 weeks, and hopefully we'll have a nice beer. Okay folks, that's the end of the video. Happy brewing, cheers.